Good evening, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and get us started. For those that don't know me, my name is Amy Thompson. I'm the college and career counselor here at Hillsborough High School. This is one of my, or I would say my most favorite evening program that I do of the year. One, because I don't have to do all the talking, which is fabulous. You all hear enough from me. But two, because you hear from a much better source of information, which is really my fabulous friends here tonight. I have 5 college and university representatives from a wide variety of schools. Our students here at Hillsborough apply to each and every one of these schools, and we have students, I think, at each and every one of these schools right now or will this fall. So I'm going to start our evening. I'll ask them to introduce themselves. They are here this evening, one, to give you information about how their university kind of does things, but really as a way to give you a perspective as to the different ways that things are handled at universities, the different ways universities look at things, just kind of the wide breadth of things that you'll see throughout the admission process. They're here to also put your mind at ease about this process, to let you know that it does not have to be the most stressful thing that you might hear from the media. Lots of students go through this process and encounter or have a lot of growth throughout the process and really come out on the other side thrilled with their outcomes. And that is really our goal, that all the students who go through this process are going to come out and wind up at a place where they'll really be able to flourish over the next 2 or 4 years, depending upon what their plans are. So I'm going to go ahead and get started and allow our first university to introduce herself.
Hi, thank you. My name is Brandy Samaru, and I'm so excited to be here tonight with you all. So good evening. I am a senior assistant director for Indiana University, located in South Central Indiana. I am an alum, and I have been working professionally with Indiana for the past 20 years. I am regionally based, like I said, so I live out here in New Jersey, and I've been out here for 13 years, and that's been working with your school for 13 years. So I am very familiar with the area. And just a little bit about Indiana, we are a large liberal arts public institution, Big Ten. We do, even though we're a public in-state school, we do have a significant out-of-state population too. So we draw big from the East Coast, but I know that we have a lot to get to tonight, so I don't want to take up too much of your time. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Jade.
Hi, folks. My name is Jade. I'm an Associate Director of Admissions at Lafayette College. Lafayette College is located in Easton, Pennsylvania. It's about an hour and 15, kind of depending where you are in the Hillsborough area, from where you are to the college. We're a traditional liberal arts school. We're really strong in engineering, in addition to the STEM fields. About a quarter of our students are engineers. We are Division I in 23 varsity teams, so it adds to a lot of school spirit. We have a huge rivalry with Lehigh University, our neighbors to the west. And then the other thing is that we offer about over 50 plus different majors and minors for our students to study in. And so if you're interested in learning more, I'm happy to share, but I'm going to pass it off to Owen.
Thank you, Jade. Hi, everybody. My name is Owen Roth. I am a Senior Assistant Director of Admission at Moravia University in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, not far from Easton and Lafayette. We're a smaller school, about 2,000 students, liberal arts core, but we have a wide variety of majors ranging from nursing and health sciences to business and a little bit of everything in between. And we are not very far from you guys, about hour 15, hour 30. So not very far from you guys right now. And I will turn it over to Christy.
Hi, everyone. My name is Christy Matarasso. I'm the Director of Recruitment and University Relations at New York University. At NYU, we're actually the largest private university in the country. We have about 25,000 undergraduate students. They are separated across 10 different undergraduate colleges that make up the university. In addition to our campus in New York, we have 2 other degree campuses located in Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates, which started in fall of 2010, and then in Shanghai, China, which started in the fall of 2013. And in addition to that, we have 13 other global sites where students can study away. And I will just turn it over to my colleague, Sarah, to finish us off.
Hi, everybody. My name is Sarah Blackburn. I'm the Director of International Admissions at Rutgers, New Brunswick, but I'm also lucky enough to be the counselor assigned to Hillsborough. So I'm happy to be here with you guys this evening. We are a large public research institution down the road. We have about 37,000 undergraduate students, about 48,000 students total with our grad population, more than 120 different majors and programs, and a huge emphasis on experiential learning, so internships and research opportunities on campus as well. Looking forward to sharing a little bit more about sort of how we view the application process at Rutgers.
All right. Thank you all so much. And I hope that all of our guests can kind of see that wide variety of schools here. And I really encourage students to consider a wide variety of schools. I feel like so often our Hillsborough students kind of migrate to larger institutions. And while I love my big schools here, I think a lot of students would find a fantastic home at a smaller or mid-sized institution that might really allow them to grow and develop over the next couple of years. So the questions that you're all going to hear from me tonight are kind of represent a cross-section of things that I hear in conversations with students, in conversations with colleagues on kind of some current topics in college admissions, really designed to give you a better understanding of the whole process right from the point of view of the folks that are on that other side of the desk. So I really appreciate them being here. My first question is really about, kind of how did this year go? What did you see in terms of trends, maybe in your applicant pool or in the process or the application? Some things maybe you loved that you were excited to see this year. What do you think our students should know? And whoever wants to go first can hop on in.
I can start off. So speaking specifically for Lafayette, what we noticed is that we saw a higher increase of early decision applications. Not saying that you have to apply early decision to an institution, but I have seen over the years an increase in that strategy of students identifying one school and then kind of strategizing from there. If you do find a school that is like your number one, you absolutely love them, fully support. But if you're doing it for the strategy wise, I would suggest to reconsider that and maybe think about, is this really the school that you want to go for? Is this the school that's going to be offering everything you want? Because it is really hard to make that decision as a 16, 17-year-old individual so early on in the process. The other thing that I've noticed is a lot of students have increased the amount of applications they've submitted. And so long gone are the days of 5 or 6 applications. Now you're getting into the double digits. Now you're getting into higher double digits. And so that's something that we've noticed, is that at Lafayette we've had an increase in applications overall, and I think that's because a lot of students are submitting multiple applications to other institutions as well. But I'm happy to have my other peers kind of chime in.
I just wanted to add one additional thing to that. As you're talking about strategies, I think one of the things we saw this year was not only the huge increase in applications, like you're saying, students are applying to so many more schools now, but we also saw a huge increase in the number of students that tried to, let's say, backdoor their way into a particular major. So you may try to apply to what you think is a easier or less competitive major, and then down the line want to change your mind. Keep in mind that's not always going to be an option where you end up looking at schools. Some schools do really make those admissions decisions based upon major, and while you may be offered admission to, say, a less competitive major at that institution, that doesn't mean that eventually you're going to be able to get that spot into that major that you really wanted. So also keeping that in mind whenever you're making those applications.
I'll definitely echo the sentiments that definitely seeing a large increase in applications year over year at Moravian, a couple record-breaking years in a row, which is, it's great to see, but it's definitely due to students just applying to more and more schools. These days, there are plenty of students applying to literally 20 colleges on the Common App, sending their FAFSA to 20 colleges. And that's a lot for the students. And it's a lot of applications to read, but overall, that's what I've heard from other schools as well. Just in general, just a lot more applications, especially early, as Jade mentioned, early action, early decision, a lot of early ones.
And I would agree that that pretty much tracks with what I see here at Hillsborough in terms of applications. I used to work in admissions, but I've been on this side of the desk for, I don't know, 15, 16 years. And it is very different than when I started 15 years ago on this side of the desk. Back then, I'd really see student lists ranging in that like 3 to 8 range was much more common. And I definitely do still have some students who are applying to 5 or 6 schools, and that is fantastic for them. Sometimes they're finding their place early. They get in a place early. It may not even be a reach school, but just a place that was a great fit for them, that they got in early, even just through a rolling application. But I definitely am seeing that average kind of creep up just over 10 is kind of the average for 4-year schools. And I'm definitely seeing more students applying to schools in that, kind of 20 to 25 range, or sometimes more. And, anecdotally, though, I can say that, for our students who are applying to very large numbers of schools that aren't reach schools, they're pretty much getting exactly the results that I could have told them that they would have gotten before they sent out their applications. So they definitely, could have done some more homework, I think, and weeded that down, because eventually we do have to pick a place. And sometimes students, this time of year, I'm seeing them, and I've got some that have, they've got their top couple and they're deciding between, and I have some that are so overwhelmed by choice that it's really hard this month of their senior year. And then I have others who sent out very large numbers of applications and didn't experience a whole lot of success because they really struggled with the, kind of that balanced list. And some of those students don't have as many as they hoped. So I encourage students to kind of come in somewhere in between and try to make sure that they do have a balanced list to try to make this process kind of doable. And just I wanted to kind of define one term or two terms just in case I have some younger students and parents, on the call. Jade mentioned early decision. So early decision is a binding way to apply to universities. So some schools that are on this panel have early decision. And I'm not sure if you do. Christy definitely does. Jade definitely does. And that is binding, which means that if you get in, you are pretty much committed to that institution, and that's where you'll be attending. The bonus is that it's early on in the process. They have some fewer applications to read. You've also had less time to put your application together. So that's something to consider. And again, it's a binding agreement. But I would say most of our students are really done with the bulk of their applying by January 1st-ish of their senior year. So, gone are the days like when I was applying to schools and it was more of kind of a January, February thing. And I worked in admissions. We were getting tons of applications in February. That's just not how it goes anymore, I would say. So, for our students that are kind of in that, my own son is late in sophomore year. I've got my juniors out there, and they're really, trying to maybe visit some places, and they're kind of overwhelmed by the sheer amount of mail that they get and emails and college names and everything. And of course, they're very influenced by what their friends are saying and doing. What are your thoughts on kind of fit, that concept of fit we talk about, and some good ways to attack kind of building a college list and figuring out if a school's a good fit?
I always encourage students, and I feel like this is probably easier said than done, to think beyond the name of an institution and just really think, kind of do some soul searching and think about the qualities that might be attributed to a place that would make you happy. For example, when I was applying to college, I knew that I wanted a small school. I knew that I really wouldn't thrive at a big place. I had determined kind of how far I wanted to be from home. And once I had those things in mind, I was an English major, so I pretty much could have studied English anywhere. But once I sort of had those thoughts about kind of the qualities I was looking for, then I was able to think more about, okay, now let me look at kind of the names of schools and figure out what kind of meets those criteria for me. I definitely agree that visiting campus is great. And I think every admissions counselor will probably encourage you to do that, because I really do think there is something about just stepping foot on a campus and feeling like if you feel comfortable there or not. And then maybe you want to visit again, or as you're maybe first starting to try and think about some of those qualities that might be right for you. Maybe you do some kind of virtual visits. I think a lot of schools still have some virtual programming. I know that we do, to try and just, again, to get you to kind of think beyond just the name, and think about really what would make you happy at a college. And I say all the time, I have a daughter, she's only in 7th grade, but I always say all the time that I really want her to go to like a small liberal arts college. Jade, maybe she'll come to you one day, we'll see. But I'm not sure if my other colleagues have other thoughts about that.
No, I think you well covered it, Christy. I refer to those kind of qualities that you're talking about of trying to like figure out what is most meaningful to you in the search process as the non-negotiables, like the handful of things that you absolutely know that you need or can't live without when it comes to building your college list. And I think what's really important is that that non-negotiable list should not look like your parents, your siblings, your friends, right? Like it's really unique to you and what you need. And it could be anything, right? That could be the location, it could be the size, it could be majors and programs offered. It could even be things outside of the classroom, like the emphasis on study abroad, for example. If you really want to have that be part of your experience, there are universities that really have that as a huge part of their ethos. So being able to sort of identify universities that fall in line with what your goals are for your college experience and sort of what you absolutely have to have will help you to whittle it down. I think one of the other things that is important to mention is that we're so lucky to be in New Jersey when it comes to the college search process, because particularly as like a sophomore or maybe even during your junior year, if you're still trying to get a sense or feel for what type of institution is going to work well for you, it doesn't require you to get on a plane to go see it, because we have small schools, large schools. You've got everything in New Jersey. Parts of Pennsylvania are super accessible and easy to get to. New York's the same way. So I think that's also a great way to at least get an idea, even if you know that you don't want to go to that school, to see what it's like at a small institution, to see what it's like at a medium-sized institution.
Yeah, I think going back to that visit piece, doing the multiple visits that Christy was mentioning, I think is very important. Tour guides and the tours and admission counselors are all great, of course, but getting those different perspectives from current students who aren't being paid to talk to you, from professors who you might be learning from, if you can get those other points of view from the different schools you're considering, that could really help you to determine what life will be like at those schools, beyond just what you see on a website or on a tour.
And that kind of thing definitely becomes helpful too, even when students are seniors and after they get admitted. I really encourage them, kind of go back and check those schools out and do exactly that. Get beyond kind of, sorry guys, I mean, I worked at admissions too, like the paid people there, and, connect with maybe former Hillsborough students who are on campus, their roommates, other people that you encounter on campus who can help you get a better idea of that institution. I think it's super important. And those, on here who are maybe parents of senior students who may be a little dragging their feet a little bit, some about going to visit, they know they want to go to college, but they're kind of dragging their feet. One of the tips I have is to kind of think about how you can pair it on to something else that you're doing. Get them active in picking some places, so that as a parent, it's not just you driving the bus. Your student really needs to engage in this process. That's super duper important. And the more they do that, more ownership they feel earlier on, the more ownership they're going to feel throughout the entire application process. And that really, really shows, I think, in their applications to schools and in the essays that they write. If they're really all in on these places, it helps them quite a bit. So can you tell me a little bit about how, and everybody here, I think, reads a little bit differently in their application process. I've got like the widest array of places here, but can you talk about how maybe your school approaches reading applications, some things that your own institution prioritizes when they're reading?
So at NYU, we definitely prioritize academics. One thing I will say, though, is that academics are obviously an important part of the application process anywhere, but with so many thousands of colleges and universities in the country, there are schools that will be an academic fit for you, I think, no matter where your grades fall. So that's something that's important to know. And Ms. Thompson and the other, school counseling folks at Hillsborough can definitely help you with that. But academics are always going to be a top priority for us. I always tell students that that's our kind of first order of business is making sure that you would be a student who would be academically that you would do well at NYU, that it would be a good fit for you. And then once we determine that, there are a lot of students who apply who would do really well at NYU. Then we move on to other qualities like looking at your essay, looking at your letters of recommendation, your extracurriculars, and just getting a kind of idea of who you are outside of just those academics. In addition to that, we do have a number of programs at NYU that culminate in a Bachelor of Music or a Bachelor of Fine Arts. And those programs, depending on the major, will require an audition or portfolio. And so for those programs, I would say the artistic submission, which we don't review, is reviewed by faculty members in those departments. That I would say is really on par with your academics. So that's just a little bit of an exception. But it really is an academic review. And then after that, sort of let's learn about everything else that makes this student who they are, and if there's someone that we think would be an interesting mix to our campus.
So I think I would completely agree with everything that Christy mentioned. The only thing I would add that is slightly unique for traditionally smaller liberal arts schools is demonstrated interest. Demonstrated interest is something that a lot of smaller schools care about because our community is that much smaller compared to a larger institution. And so one thing for Lafayette is that we do take into consideration demonstrate interest when we consider the decision of the student. So if we get a student who has shown no DI versus a student who's done a campus tour and maybe gone to the high school visit when I visited Hillsborough, or has done an interview or has done something virtually, we would lean a little bit more towards that individual because that individual we would assume knows a little bit more about Lafayette, is a little bit more invested because they've connected with us multiple times. And so I would say that demonstrated interest, depending on the institutions that you're applying to, may or may not be a factor. That's a really simple question to ask the admissions office when you start kind of going through like which schools you want to apply to is, do you track demonstrated interest? So those millions of emails that you're getting, some schools do pay attention to them. So I would recommend you open them. You don't have to read everything, but I would recommend opening them.
I just had one thing to add, and I'm sorry if this is already mentioned. My internet connection is not stable, so I've been freezing. But I would say that one other thing we use when we review applications, we talked a little bit about this, is timing of application. We do absolutely give priority consideration to students that complete an application by our early action non-binding deadline. So students that complete earlier are given that priority consideration for admission. The students that apply regular, it can get a little bit more competitive in that admission scenario. And so the vast majority of our freshman class is made up of those students that completed an application early. So timing along with academics is important for us.
For Moravian, it's going to be focused primarily on the grades. If you're looking in, and you guys are on the 100-point scale, I believe, in like the 80s or 90s, going to be pretty fine typically. Just below that, that's when we're going to consider more the essay, the letters of recommendation, the extracurriculars, like what kind of fit will the student have for the university, even if the grades are a little more borderline. The only big difference, their exception would be our nursing program is more competitive. So we are looking, if you apply earlier, that is going to help you. So that's something to consider, especially for more competitive programs like a nursing program or like competitive music programs, things like that. So look at the specific requirements for more competitive programs, even if the school itself isn't as competitive.
And thanks. I heard a lot of things there that I would say very much resonate across the entire process. I can probably think of 6 or 8 very large schools similar to IU, where I would say you really, really, really need to apply early action. And I encourage students throughout the process to get those applications in early to those schools, because the results really prove out in that those who apply earlier on are in better standing than those that don't. And to Owen's point, nursing, I always encourage my nursing students to apply early. Nursing is a tough nut to crack. It's often the hardest way to get into an institution. And I think that is something a lot of families don't realize kind of heading in. So I always recommend my potential nurses have a really, really balanced list of schools. Get out some of those applications early, maybe have kind of an A list and a B list sometimes. Sometimes things don't go the way you think it's going to go in nursing, but in nursing, you're often, they have an exact number of spots typically that they need to fill for nursing, where they may not be quite so exact for something like psychology. So it puts a lot of pressure on that nursing application. Owen kind of brought up our applications for families that aren't super familiar with our transcripts. When you log into Genesis, parents, and you look at that parent portal, or students, you look at that transcript you see there, that's what some of these guys, and we'll talk about that piece in a second, get. But that's the information that they're seeing, however they get it. So they're seeing a list of the courses that you've taken at Hillsborough, the level that you took it at, how many credits you got for it, and the actual grade that's you got in the class. They're seeing that on a scale of 0 to 100 for each class. They're also going to get a GPA. They'll see an unweighted GPA and a weighted GPA that is cumulative. So that is really, at the time you're applying, that is a 9th grade, 10th grade, and 11th grade GPA. So those that are juniors, that's kind of going to round out in the next couple of months. That's kind of be the last thing that they see. But I'm interested in getting the perspective, and this varies very much from school to school, on how do you approach looking at those transcripts? What do you do with that 100-point scale? I get kids asking me all the time, what is that on a 4.0 scale? Like, do you care? Do you look at weighted, unweighted? Do you recalculate GPAs in some way? Frankly, do you even care about this number that we call the GPA? Because sometimes students think I'm crazy when I say, like, it's really kind of, it's just a number. And they think that's wild. So I'm interested to hear what you all think.
So Rutgers is one of those places that won't see the transcript that you folks are seeing, at least not when it comes to the admissions process. So we ask students to self-report their grades. And I know there's at least 1 or 2 other institutions on the call that operate in the same way. So it's becoming more and more common. And I was thinking about this when we were talking a little bit about sort of what we prioritize within the application process. Every university has similarities, right? We're all going to say the academics come first, but then you hear things like Lafayette and the issue of demonstrated interest, right? That matters in their process. It does not at Rutgers. And I think the way that we would handle your transcripts or your self-reported academic record is going to vary pretty dramatically from institution to institution. That's why it's always so important to ask questions and to get an understanding, because we really do not mean for this process to be so opaque, right? Like, we want to share information with you, but I know that can be hard to grasp when we all keep saying the same things, a holistic review and so on. As it comes to the Hillsborough transcripts for us at Rutgers, we don't recalculate your GPA. We use whatever GPA you choose to report. So if you want to share the weighted GPA, that's fine. If you'd like to share the unweighted GPA, that's okay too. We're not going to recalculate it. And we're actually more concerned with your individual grades in certain courses or subject GPAs than we are with your overall GPA that you're reporting. The other thing that, becomes important, and I see some questions coming in, I know we're going to dive into this a little bit more later, so I won't say too much, but course rigor is important as well. So it's not just going to be the grades in that individual subject, but whether or not you're choosing to take those honors and AP courses, and challenging yourself within the context of what's available at Hillsborough.
And you all can feel free to dive right into those questions around, because they were coming anyway, but here they are, about things like senior year course choice, APs, as in is an A in CP better than a B or a C in AP and all of that kind of stuff. Feel free to incorporate any of that in your answer.
You know your constituents, Amy.
So I feel like Sarah just read my mind in terms of talking about how we look at grades. Well, first of all, we also use a self-reported process. We ask you to do the self-reported academic record, the SRIR, for sure. And that just allows us, a lot of big schools use it. It just allows us to look at high school transcripts from thousands of high schools, not only around the country, but around the world in a more standard way. So you will report your GPA to us. We don't do any recalculating, but as Sarah said, I always joke with students when they ask about GPA. I always say that high school students are way more obsessed with their GPA than we are. And again, that's not to say that your grades aren't important, but it's just that we're not saying, oh, 3.8, like check. We're doing a much deeper dive into each class you've taken, looking at the rigor of the curriculum you're taking, what classes are offered to you at your school. Are you taking advantage of some of those advanced courses to challenge yourself when it's appropriate in subject areas that are still strengths for you and you're doing well in those classes? Are you still taking a good course load in your senior year? Are you doing consistently well, or have you had an upward trend, which would be preferable to a downward trend? But so we're really looking at all of those things. It's a much deeper dive into your transcript than just sort of kind of checking off a GPA.
Just from a little different perspective, we actually do use the high school transcript at Indiana. We do not recalculate a GPA, though. We will take a student's highest cumulative GPA off of their transcript. So yes, that is usually the weighted GPA. So that is the GPA that we will use. It is just one of the data points in our review process, though, like everybody's been saying. The academics are definitely a piece of that. Rigor definitely comes into play with that as well. But it's just one piece of that. And I did see a question about 12th grade, the 12th grade year in the chat. That depends. I think that's an it depends question, because most students are going to apply early, which means those decisions are going to come out prior to you having any grades in your 12th grade year. So those grades are typically not used, especially if students are applying early action or early decision. Those aren't going to be used in our admissions review process unless we specifically ask for them. But we do, like my colleagues here, we're not recalculating a GPA. We're going to use whatever you send.
So let me be the one who goes against the grain. We do recalculate the GPA. At Lafayette, we actually strip down to your 5 academic solids. So we do math, English, social studies, science, and world languages. We don't care about health. We don't care about gym, so it's okay. But we do look at your core academic solids and make sure that you're doing well in those courses. And we do care about your senior year grades. And so we will ask you for your senior year grades and for your senior year curriculum, because we want to see that you're increasing your curriculum every year and you're not getting senioritis in your senior year. Because college is not going to get easier as you go through those grades. And so we want to make sure that you're going to be successful even in your senior year at Lafayette or any other institution. And so what happens is if a student applies early decision, we ask for the first marking period grades. If you apply regular decision, we ask for your first semester grades. And so we do care about your grades and we do care about the classes that you're taking. Kind of to loop that in with the courses that with the CP classes where you can get an A, or the advanced classes where you can get a B or maybe a softer grade, I would encourage the students to challenge yourselves. If this is a class or a topic that you're really interested in, and this might be something you want to pursue in college, challenge yourself and take that higher level class. But if you're getting like C's or failing this class, then maybe you want to step back a little bit. And so give yourself that shot to like, I'm going to see it for the first few weeks, or maybe try that class. And then if you don't feel like it's a comfortable fit for you, then you can always switch down to a lower course, and we can see that in your transcript. But I would encourage the students to challenge themselves. We prefer not to see students with CP all 4 years. That's not a successful student at Lafayette, at least.
Moravian's a little bit of a combination. We don't recalculate. We will convert to a 4.0 GPA based on the highest listed GPA. So, for you guys weighted on a 100-point scale, we'll convert that. We will ask for senior year grades typically just for students who maybe they're a little bit more borderline and we just want to see if there's been an improvement trend. So if you are a borderline student or if you have a borderline student, especially if they struggled in like math or English, let's say, make sure they're taking that as a senior and that they're doing well in their first and second quarters, because that will be very important. Beyond that, again, nursing program will probably look at senior grades for a lot of students unless they are like outstanding top percentile GPAs with like all A's in their science courses. But in general, we are just going to look at the GPA unless there's any red flags like D's or F's on like some core academic courses.
And I see some courses, a question here about recalculating GPA, just to kind of give people a better idea, like why do schools do that? One, it kind of brings students from a wide variety of educational systems into a more standardized way of viewing them. It also, in many cases, when schools recalculate the GPA, they're looking at just the academic courses. So as Jade mentioned, those 5 core subjects. So that means that your wood grades, your advanced graphic grades, things like that, they're not counting in there. So they're getting at how are you actually doing in your academic courses. Our GPA is really a construct, you know, we weighted a lot, I'll be honest, you know, probably more than many other schools. And you might be worried, like, does that mean they're taking away their weighting? When schools are recalculating, somewhere within their process, they're building into account for the rigor of courses that you took. The GPA, like I said, the GPA that we put there, that's just some random number that we kind of come up with, to be really honest. You know, we decided, or someone decided a long time ago, that our courses were going to be weighted 1.15 for AP, 1.1 for honors, 1.05 for CP, 1.0 for whatever else is left. You know, every school, if you go down the road to Montgomery and to Manville and Bridgewater, they all do things differently. So recalculating and looking at things a different way is allows them to, you know, get a better view about where you really stand, maybe compared to kind of the greater applicant pool, I would say. I wanted to move on. We did start to get some questions about oh, and then I do see some questions too about honors and AP. You know, that is really very relevant to where you're applying as an institution. I certainly have students who attend 4-year schools that have all CP course loads. I have students at a wide variety of, I'm going to use the bad word, GPAs that are going to 4-year schools, but it does differ very much by institution. You know, and oftentimes you're going to see that schools would really like to see you challenge yourself, especially in your area of interest. So, you know, there are some number of our students that have all honors, all AP, and all of the subjects, but a much larger number of our schools students, including students who have gotten admitted to every single one of the schools on this panel. I mean, I have students at every single one of these schools that have gotten in with some CP courses on their transcript at every single school up here. So don't assume that it must be all honors, all AP every single year to get in anywhere. As long as the rest of your application makes sense, it could still be a possibility for you. So it really depends. And I want to kind of move on a little bit into the kind of testing, that dirty word, standardized testing. Can you talk about where we are with that at your institution? Kind of for as long as you know where we are, because we still are in that land of flux, or at least at some of your institutions. And how do you consider testing, I guess, within the admission process? And when I refer to testing, I'm really referring primarily to SAT and ACT testing, though some of you may take other things into account.
Moravian is totally test optional. We have been for quite a while now. We'll look at it if you submit scores. Most of our students, most of our applicants don't. It could really, the only real benefit would be if a student is, again, a little more borderline, but they have strong test scores, that could help them. But if it's a strong student and they have average or strong test scores, it really is not going to make a difference for us.
At NYU, we were just told, I think 2 weeks ago, that we're going to stay test optional for the next cycle. So that means those of you who are current juniors, you will be applying under our test optional policy. There is no decision farther out than that in the future. The Board of Trustees at NYU is very much like 1 year at a time. Because I would say we were one of those schools that went test optional in the pandemic. It had never been previously. Since then, it's usually a little over half of our applicant pool that applies test optional, a little under half that applies with testing. It really, for us, is the kind of thing where if you send it, we will use it. We highly encourage students to look at our kind of testing averages from the previous year to determine whether or not they should send their testing at schools that are test optional. The averages tend to be artificially inflated because typically only students who have strong scores are sending those exams. It's a good question to ask at every school to which you are applying, though, because there are some schools that will encourage testing, or maybe they don't require it for admission, but maybe they do for some scholarship purposes, maybe for merit scholarships. So I think it's probably a very individual question that you just want to be sure. And just remember that you might have an excellent score in the grand scheme of standardized testing in general, but if you're applying to a highly selective institution, your school counselor might say, you know what, let's not send that score, and that's not a value judgment on you or your performance or how well you've done. It just means that you're applying to a school that gets a lot of applications, so even though that score is an excellent score, maybe let's just not send it. And I always tell students, we don't make any assumptions. Students will say, oh, if I don't send my score, are you assuming I did badly? I'm not assuming anything. I don't have a score to look at, so I'm just going to look at all of the other parts of your application.
I would also add in the fact that I just lost my train of thought. Oh my gosh. I will answer a question. Hopefully my thought will come back. One of the questions was the fact that does submitting your test score to a test optional school, does that go against them? And it does not. So if you are applying to a test optional school and you do submit your test scores, that's just another factor that we're taking consideration. So you think about your application as like a pie. That's just one slice of the pie. But if you don't include your test scores, then those other portions of the pies are just a little bit bigger. But that doesn't negate the fact that we're going to assume that if you don't submit your scores, that they're terrible scores. And then I remembered my point is the fact that, well, what if I do submit, am I being compared to a student who did submit from the same high school? At Lafayette, we don't. And so we don't compare, but we look at students who submitted together and students who don't submit together. So we're not putting two students who are submitters and non-submitters in the same pool because that's not fair. And so we do take into consideration the students who do submit in terms of their scores and the students who don't submit their applications.
The only other thing that I'd like to add about test scores is each university will handle somewhat differently the idea of if you want to change your mind after having submitted your test scores. Rutgers, if we can't unsee your test scores. So if you decide at a later date after you've already sent them, they will be considered whether you want us to or not. So I would be really, really mindful about which universities, if any, you put down when you're actually sitting to take the test, and make sure that you're only sending them to the schools that you want to consider that information, and ask questions. Again, every university may handle this somewhat differently. At least for us, that policy has evolved since the pandemic as we've been navigating the test optional practice. There were years when we would allow students to change their mind, and now we're no longer doing that. So I definitely ask questions about that if you're unsure. And rely on your counselors. You have excellent ones, and they'll help to guide you as it pertains to which schools you should send your scores to.
And just quickly, Indiana is test optional. I would agree with everything that my colleagues have said. We are one of those institutions where we do allow you to change your mind. So you can at any point let us know if you would no longer like us to take those into consideration. And we are about a 50-50 split for those that do versus those that don't. It's kind of creeped up for the number of students that are submitting test scores since students are now able to take the test again. And then we do also super score as well. So keep that in mind. If you do test multiple times, we'll take your highest sub scores.
And what I don't have represented on our panel tonight is there are some schools that do require test scores. Some schools have required them all the way along. The Florida Public Schools, for instance, is a great example. They've kind of required them the whole time. They still require them. Georgia Tech requires, Tennessee, Purdue, half or maybe a little more than half of the Ivies now. I'm not sure where we're at with that number. But there are some schools that out there that do require. We encourage students to test and then figure out what they want to do from there. And for some students, that a lot of students, I would say, that gives them options, that lets them kind of figure out where they stand and what they want to do. And if they feel like some of these test required schools are places that they really feel strongly they want to apply to, then they, probably are going to put some more time and study effort into, retesting a couple times. And other students might decide at that point, I feel like to get a score I feel like equates with my ability, I feel like I'm going to have to put in a lot of money or a lot of time. And maybe there's other places that I could better spend that money and time. They may choose after testing once that, what, I'm okay with losing out on these few schools that are test required. I'm just gonna, go without. But I would say the bulk of our students apply to some schools with scores and some schools without scores. And I feel like most schools out there are still running somewhere around a 50-50. Are you all somewhere in that 50-ish percent? 50 to, yeah, about half usually. And I do find that at most schools, the number that submit, the percentage that apply with and without scores is usually pretty close to what I see in the admitted pool. Is that accurate? I feel like I'm seeing a lot of nods. It's pretty close. So when they say test optional, they really mean test optional. The other thing that's out there is test blind. Just so you know, there are some schools out there, like the entire University of California system, for example, that are test blind, which means that they do not consider the SAT or the ACT in the admission process at all. Can't send them, they don't read them, they don't see them, they don't use them. So just so you know that those are out there as well. Now let's get beyond some of the numbers, the parts that they're kind of like a finite combination of, and talk about all of the other parts of the application that are out there. Interested in knowing how you consider extracurriculars. I feel like sometimes students are kind of fishing with me to wonder what that magic EC is that's going to get them in, or exactly how many hours of volunteer service they need to get into a school. I'm kind of interested in, like, what are you looking for as you're reviewing that part of the application, and what kind of shows potential success at your school?
There is absolutely not like one special extracurricular activity that you can do and it'll be like, oh my God, Model UN, like the student is absolutely admitted. That's not how it works. Um, it's really, at least for Rutgers, and I would imagine that it's similar for some of my colleagues, if not all of them. Extracurriculars are more of a secondary factor when it comes to your application, right? We're focused on your academics first, as we've belabored, and then these other holistic things like your extracurriculars, family obligations, work that you're doing, whatever it is that you're doing outside of the classroom becomes a contextual factor for us to get to know a little bit more about you. Some institutions may use it to identify fit to a particular major, things like that. One other thing I'll say is I would much rather see you do one or two things that you love, whether they're related to your major or not, than have the longest list of extracurricular activities possible known to man. It's totally fine to like test things out and see if you like them. That's approved, signed. But if you are just trying to make the list as long as possible, that doesn't tell us anything, right? What we want to use these extracurriculars for is to get to know what makes you tick. What are you passionate about? We love to see you taking leadership roles in organizations at school, or becoming the captain or of a team, or and so on. We really want to use it as an opportunity to learn a little bit more about your leadership skills and what it is that you truly enjoy, rather than, trying to check boxes on your application.
Yeah, echoing that, we definitely take a similar approach at Moravian. We want to see extracurriculars, but also if they're not there, that's okay. Like some people can't do it because they don't have a ride or they have to work or who knows what they're doing. We also have direct admissions where people may not even have their extracurriculars listed on their application because it's such an abbreviated process. That being said, the more we know about a student, the better it'll be, let's say, for like our financial aid conversations, because that could have implications there, or even just for us to recommend different resources or different connections on campus as they're considering different people to talk to as they're trying to make their decision. So we're not going to use it really for the application decision, the admission decision in most cases, but it's still good to see, especially I'm sure my colleagues will say here, a lot of students who come to a lot of schools are more engaged. They do participate in different things. And that's better to see because then that's a better fit student for a lot of colleges.
The last thing I would add is just we care about impact. And so are you are you a member of a club and you're just going to the meetings, you're just kind of sitting there by the wall as a wall in a flower wall? Or are you someone who's leading? Are you someone who's like, oh, let's start an initiative, let's start a project, let's get people together? Are you the cheerleader? Are you somebody who's going to make impact in the club or in your community? And so with Lafayette, we do have a limitation of activities. You can submit up to 10, but what we do is we look up at your top 6 activities. And for the purpose that Sarah mentioned, is we care about the quality, not the quantity of what you're doing. It is nearly physically, mentally, emotionally impossible to do 10 activities 100% of the time. But what are you deciding? What is important to you, and what are you doing to spend your time? We know that your time is precious, so you're not going to do something that you're not going to want to do or something that you're going to have to do. And so think about what is important to you, think about what's core to your identity, and that's really going to come out in your application. And so if you're someone who cares about community service and it's really core to you, then we're going to see that in the leadership, we're going to see that in the impact. But if you're someone who's like, I have to do it for a high school requirement or for something requirement, that's going to be very clear to us, and that's not something you care about. And so that's something where the activities page is a really wonderful way to showcase who you are as an individual beyond your academics. Your academics, you don't have too much control over, but you do have control over what you can do outside the classroom. Are you someone who started a passion project and that counts as an activity? Are you someone who built a computer, done an Eagle Scout project? Are you someone who's working? Are you someone who's contributing to the family household income? That is important for us to know because that gives us contextual information about who you are as an individual and what is important to you. So I would also kind of frame that activities page in terms of how would you think about your impact in the community, in your high school, in your family, and how would you like that impact to be represented to us as the institutions?
And this is all making me chuckle a little bit because in my own house last week, I was dealing with the misconceptions about extracurriculars in the admission process. And I was informed that my 10th grader had to do a sport because colleges only care about that, and that nothing he did in 9th grade mattered at all. So, interesting stuff. So what they're, and I was kind of laughing as I was listening to him have this conversation with my husband, because, it's not like I do this for a job role. And I'm listening to the 100 Central panel and I hear Carlos Cano from Stevens come on, and he was talking about, what he's really looking for is that commitment, that dedication to activities. You don't need all of the things, to that point that Sarah was making. And I find that many of our students who are most successful in the admission process are students that found things that they cared about, legitimately cared about them. And that showed in the application process. They're not students who were trying to check all of the boxes. I find that many of my box checkers struggle most in the admissions process, and especially in the selective admission process, whereas those that have a more focused approach to what they're doing and a more authentic approach really tend to find more success, is what I generally seem to see. Some of the things that other questions that are out there, and the next thing that I wanted to talk about a little bit was kind of that essay piece, or if your school has a supplemental essay and you want to talk about that a little bit. But like, what are you looking for in essays? What kind of makes you cringe? What makes you cheer? What makes something memorable? And if anyone has any interesting thoughts on the use of AI in essays, I'm always hip to hearing about those.
I think I'll first say definitely be aware of which schools you're applying to and how they look at essays. Like at Moravian, we recommend it, but it's really just to get to know students better. I've never denied a student because of their essay. Other schools, that's not necessarily the case. So you definitely want to be clear before you submit your essay to any school. But in general, I just want to learn more about the student at Moravian. So whether it's your greatest victory or a lesson you learned or even something that was hard for you, it doesn't matter. I just want to learn more about the student. I say try to avoid the AI. We'll typically notice it probably, and I'm not going to deny you again. I won't deny you because you wrote your essay with AI, but schools who place more weight on the essay might.
I would add that the schools that have supplemental questions pay specific attention to them because we are not trying to give ourselves more things to read, but we're asking you those questions for a specific purpose. And so the traditional popular question that most schools will ask is why this school? If you're a student who's trying to, cheat the system a little bit, buy yourself some extra time, just copy paste in every institution, that's not going to work for you, at least for the smaller liberal arts schools, because we care about those questions and we actually read through those questions. And particularly for us, I replace that with other schools and I say to myself, does this make sense for NYU or Rutgers or anyone else? And if it does, then the student really didn't take enough time and effort to actually understand who we are, and they may not actually be a good fit for our institution. And so we do take that into consideration when we think about the decision. But think about why the schools are asking you these types of questions, because again, we're not trying to give ourselves extra work. We got plenty of things to read already in the reading season. But think about like if the school is asking me for who inspires me, well, why is that core to the institution's um, mission statement, or is that core to the institution? If the institution is asking me like, how do I challenge myself or X, Y, and Z, that may be because it's something that's really important to the school and that's something that's really kind of a strong thread amongst the institution. And so you want to take that in consideration because that allows you to better understand the school and better allow you to place yourself in front of the school and say, I'm a good fit for you because of X, Y, and Z. And so I would just take some time to really think about those supplemental questions and to really actually put some genuine care in them because some schools do care about them. And so you can always ask us what schools do and don't care so you can plan your time accordingly. But if you are only looking at those smaller schools, we do care.
Jade's comment about, kind of looking at your essay and thinking about how it relates to the school's mission, I think was really powerful. You can Google like every school to which you're applying to and kind of their mission statement. And that is something that I think, whether it's through your essay or your activities or supplemental writing or through the letters of recommendation that we read it, I think generally that is something that we all are looking for as well, in addition to just good writing and good proofreading and making sure someone else reads it to check your tone and learning a little something more about you. I think through your writing is a great way for us to really get a sense if you're a student who we feel would really connect with our mission and thrive in the type of education that we're each trying to offer to students.
It is one of the only places on your application where you have control, where you get to tell us something that we can't guess or someone else isn't telling us about you. So I think it's a really important piece of the application for universities that ask for or consider it. And for that reason, gosh, it really bums me out when I see an AI written essay. It's such a wasted opportunity, right? Like, you know yourself, you don't need to ask somebody, a computer function to write the essay for you. And yes, be authentic to yourself because we can always, always, always tell.
So I don't have much to add here because we, like Owen, it's kind of a secondary thing for Indiana University. But I will say that much like how AI can take your voice out of it, if you have a person proofread and proofread and proofread again, sometimes they're going to take your voice out of that too. So be careful. Definitely have somebody proofread it. I'm not saying that. We absolutely want you to have somebody proofread your essay, but do it give them a time limit on how to proofread it and take their notes into consideration. But if you have somebody continue to proofread it, they're going to take your voice out of it as well. And as far as AI, there are some positives to it. You can absolutely use it to generate ideas, but do not use it to write your essay at all.
Thanks for kind of weighing in there. And I would definitely say, the best essays I've read are really just about things that are super personal to that student. And I think what's really important for, the parents and other adults to know is that essays are very different than essays were when we were all applying to college. When we applied to college, if you're anywhere within my age range and, probably 10 years younger, it was more about a personal statement and, these are the things I did, and this is why I'm a good fit for your school, or this is why I want to come to your school. And for the most part, there may be a place within the application for some things like that, for this is why I want to come to your school, and this is what interests me there. But the primary essay that students are really using is a way for them to say something that's really important to them in the application process that they feel that they want the school to know. And, we're really looking for students will learn kind of we're getting there in end of junior year soon, they will get to kind of working on essays. And what they'll find is, you're really looking to tell the university some qualities about yourself and use some type of story to tell that. And, I've seen, there's always the sports essays and the marching band essays and all those other things. But some of the greatest things I've seen are like a story about like making, Sunday gravy with grandma in the kitchen and things like that. They don't have to be these like huge mind blowing topics to be fabulous. And I think that best essays I've read are really just students authentically being themselves in whatever that is. And sometimes, not every student is the world's best writer, and that's okay. I encourage students to kind of stay true to an essay style that works for them, and stop comparing yourself to everybody else's essay. Because you want your essay to be about you. And that is what is going to show through in the admission process, because it needs to be consistent with all the other things that are out there. And so parents, I kind of also caution you there as well. It's super tempting to get in there and try to, just fix a few things, but it is very obvious to folks on the other side of the desk, because my 40-plus-year-old self writes very differently from my 16-year-old son. And they know that too. So what some of the other things that, I wanted to talk about, I guess the one thing I didn't mention was kind of recommendations, and recommendation letters, counselor letters, teacher letters, etc. Some of my friends here don't use letters of recommendation, which I know might blow the minds of some people who are kind of new to this process. I thought everybody used that. Well, they don't. So for my friends that do look at letters of recommendation, do you have any thoughts on, what you're looking for in those? Are there any like, it must be from this grade or must be from this subject kind of things? What do you guys think about them?
So at NYU, we require one letter of recommendation, and it can be from anyone who is in a position of authority, essentially. So a school counselor, a coach, a teacher, so essentially not a peer. And I would say we're really just looking for another, we learn about you from your grades and your activities and your essay and everything that you're choosing to share with us. But we're just looking to get a different perspective about you. We love reading anecdotes about maybe, something, a conversation you led in the classroom, or how, you've worked with your school counselor if they're writing the recommendation on approaching the college process, or whatever the case may be. So it's just another way to hear from someone else who knows you well, to help us learn a little bit more about you. At many large institutions, there won't be a way for us to meet you in person or have like a one-on-one conversation. I know there were some questions in the chat about interviews. So I think a letter of recommendation can be a great way for us to just kind of get those additional opinions to help us see if you're someone who would be a great member of the community and of the classroom.
Moravian is similar. We're going to require one letter But from a school counselor or a teacher in a core academic subject, so math, English, history, science, somebody who can speak to your academic fit. Um, but if you want to send in more letters from teachers in a business class or like a healthcare focused class, something like that, or a coach or a faith leader or a mentor, we'll read as many as you send in. We just require at least the one. And technically it's supposed to be from a teacher in like junior or senior year, but I don't check the grade level personally. So
I do want to add before the students start going crazy and asking all their teachers, please don't submit more than 4, please. Because for the schools that do read all the letters of recommendation, I had a student who submitted 7 and I was not happy with them by the end of their application. So if you want to make a bad impression, no, I'm kidding. But what I do want to say is the fact that and one of the questions is, what is an ideal letter of recommendation? An ideal letter of recommendation allows us to get to know your impact, again, either in the classroom or in the community or in something. We know how you're doing academically because it's reflected on your transcript. We know what you're interested in. But how are you as a peer? How are you as a team player? How are you as a leader in the classroom? And so that's where the letters recommendation will help us be able to better contextualize your impact in the classroom. Now, if you want a teacher, you can certainly submit it from a teacher. As Christy mentioned, you can also do it from a mentor, a coach, or a religious individual or supervisor. So it can be anyone in the community as well. We want someone to be able to talk about you beyond your application. So when you're thinking about who to ask, I would recommend asking someone. Think about who you want to ask now, if most of you folks are juniors, and give them time to write that letter of recommendation. If you ask your professor, if you ask your teacher, your mentor, or that individual 2 weeks before the deadline, that's not a lot of time for them to actually write that letter of recommendation for you and for everyone else who's also asked them. And so I would strongly encourage you to consider that now and then give them a heads up so that over the summer they may have more time to actually type out a good letter of rec. Because when we get those recs where students ask the teachers a few days before the deadline, or the teacher may not know that student very well, it is very clear in the fact that it's very generic in what the teacher says or what the counselor says or what the individual says. And so a good letter recommendation gives us a little bit more information about your impact in the high school or in the community. The other thing to consider is you can ask a teacher or an individual where maybe you struggled a little bit, because that will allow us to get to understand how you can overcome challenges. And so maybe you didn't do so well in a core solid, or maybe you made a little mistake in as a employer, as employee. That will be helpful for us to know because it allows us to know that you can think about things critically. You can overcome challenge. You can face different things that are a little bit more challenging or adversity. And so that just allows us to get to know you more holistically as a person beyond just your academics. Because everyone here in this call is more than just their test scores, is more than just their academics. And so we want to be able to understand you as a person, and your letter of recommendation from another individual allows us to kind of see that perspective from an adult to an adult on behalf of you.
I just wanted to quickly add something. I agree with everything everybody's already said. Indiana University doesn't require letters of recommendation, though, and some schools absolutely will not even take them, but we will at least accept 1 counselor and 1 teacher, but that is our limit. So do not submit anything above that. And then just a couple of things to think about that I'm going to steal from another panel that I was on. I think a couple of my colleagues on this call might have been on the panel too, so I can't remember who said it. Hopefully it wasn't one of you. But I would say that keep in mind when you're thinking about who to ask, we don't know who the popular teachers are. So it seems to be going around where students want to ask the same teacher or teachers to write these letters of recommendation. They can get overwhelmed. So again, thinking about some of the things Jade said, maybe you pick a class where you struggled a little bit. It doesn't have to be that so-called popular teacher because we're not going to know that. And then after they write those recommendations letters for you, keep in mind, that's not part of their job. They're doing that as a kindness and a favor to you. So you take that extra step and maybe personally handwrite them a thank you note, just to show your gratitude for doing that for you.
Teachers would be thrilled with a handwritten thank you note. They're thrilled with an email thank you note. They're thrilled with you stopping by and acting like we all still exist by the spring of your senior year, when you're ready to check out. A couple things I kind of wanted to mention. You heard some variety in the letter of recommendations here. At Hillsborough, we really try to ask students to keep that to asking 2 teachers for letters of recommendation. That's generally going to cover you at the schools you ask for. And remember, we have a lot of students and we don't have as many teachers as we'd like, right? And everybody has sort of limits as to what they can do and how much they can spend doing this, and what is often, their free nights and weekends and things like that. And an essay, a letter of recommendation isn't something they like jot off in 10 minutes. Many teachers, it's taking them 30 minutes to 60 minutes or sometimes more, depending on their writing ability, to write that letter. And so, in consideration for the fact that everybody needs letters, we like to try to ask everybody to kind of keep it to that 2 number that's going to cover them. And it sounds like, Jade, your school is willing to be more flexible, accept, non-academic letters and other things like that. And those things can certainly add to your application. Know that the ability to do that depends very much on where you apply. There are many schools out there that it is 1 total letter must be academic, or 2 total letters they can only be academic. There's lots others out there, though, that are more flexible. And so it is really about, where you're applying. So I encourage students that are juniors and you're thinking about maybe outside letters, get a somewhat of a handle on where you're applying first, and then start to take a look at what those schools' policies are. Because just like we didn't want to, kind of like waste the time of extra teachers, right, who may not be able to ever send that letter in. We also don't want to waste the time of your mentors and employers and things like that if you wind up applying to a whole bucket of schools that don't take any letters at all or don't take outside letters. So it's good to get a good handle on those. And I find that those outside folks tend to be much less overwhelmed about the whole recommendation process, because they're probably just writing yours or maybe one other student that you work with, but they're not being asked to write 10 or 20 or 30 letters of recommendation. So kind of think about that. And I often have students that are asking those people in the summer or even early in the fall, and that can often be okay. And you'll notice that Sarah from Rutgers was suspiciously quiet during this entire conversation. And that's because, there's a good number of schools out there, just like Rutgers, that they do not accept letters of recommendation in the application process. So we will not send students letters to Rutgers. No, you cannot send them. No, they will not read them. Please don't do that. It's just not a part of what they do there. And you will find that for a good percentage of large institutions. So if you are applying to all very, very big schools, check those policies, because I definitely have some students that need not a single letter in their entire process. So it does depend on the school. So I think we're getting to a point that we can wrap up. And I love to end it with, kind of what is your, I would say, best advice for kind of this application process. I think that's always a good way to wrap things up.
I think that if you approach the process kind of as we've discussed, in thinking about the qualities of the schools that are of interest to you, and taking the good advice from your school counselors, if you end up with a list of places that are all places that you would be very happy to attend, if you are admitted, then I think you've done a good job and you've done what you're supposed to. And I know that sounds very obvious, but I hear all the time from school counselors of students who, it's April and they're making their decision and they're not happy with their options. And I'm like, why did they apply to those schools if they wouldn't have been happy with them? And I think it's just good to remember that it's for sure all going to work out. I think that a really important part of the college experience isn't necessarily where you go, but just kind of what you make of that experience when you're there. I often tell the story of my niece who got waitlisted at her first choice school, just languished on the wait list, never got off the wait list. And so she ended up enrolling at her second choice institution. And, a little disappointedly, I guess, because she still had her heart set on that first choice school. But then, fast forward into her senior year, she had studied abroad and was like president of her class and, has made lifelong friends. And because she just went in and knew that she was going to make the best of her experience. So I think that that is just something to think about. It's going to be great.
Something that I will also answer in regards to one of the questions that was asked is, especially at this time of year, something I tell the students is don't let the school's decision impact your mental health. There are going to be multiple reasons and multiple factors that come into a decision. And so you may think that you're the perfect fit for a school, and then a school may waitlist you, just like in Christy's situation. And what I would recommend is for that student to think about all the schools that you've applied to, and hopefully you will be happy if you landed in any one of those schools. But please know that there's a lot of factors that are taken into consideration, institutional factors, that students don't even know about, that may factor into a decision. And so it's always so difficult because I say this, but it's so hard to like actually embrace it because it is your mental health, and and there is a lot of self-worth that is tied to the school that you're going to and to the decision or to the merit or whatever that may be. And so I just want you to hear from a college rep saying that it's okay to just breathe and to really focus on the fact that you're about to go off to college. And so, how well do you know yourself? How well can you advocate for yourself? How well can you challenge yourself? In your 12-ish years of schooling, you've basically followed the format of the people in front of you. You go to class, you know what classes to take, but this is the first time that you get to choose your classes. You get to choose your roommate. You get to choose the involvements that you're part of. You get to have a lot of choice and autonomy in college. And so start thinking about how you want to advocate for yourself. Start thinking about how you want to live more independently. Start thinking about how you want to make impact in the community around you, but start kind of reflecting on yourself and thinking about how you want to move forward from that and to be yourself. You don't have to fall into the cookie cutter of what it's like to be at your high school or your community group, but be yourself. And the colleges that will see that will celebrate you for that and will embrace you for that. And so I try to warn folks to really take care of yourself in this process because it is a difficult one. But you have so much support. You have the college counselors, you have the college reps, you have your family and your peers who can help you through this process, but don't think you're doing this alone.
Sort of on the same lines, I think it's important to protect yourself and your mental health towards the end of this process when the decisions are coming back, but you really should be doing it the entire time, right? Be kind to yourself as you're developing your lists and sort of getting to know yourself in that way. Be kind to your classmates who are going through the sort of same process of self-discovery, right? And also getting those rejections, things like that. Be kind to your teachers who you're asking for recommendation letters. Be kind to Mrs. Thompson, who's just here to help you. Be kind to your parents who, again, also just want to help you. So I think that's sort of my large piece of advice. Be kind to the college reps when you call them. Be kind to everybody through this process, but most importantly, be kind to yourself as well.
This is always mine too, is to be kind to yourself and to take a moment and to breathe and stuff. So I think we're all on the same page here. But I would also just add that it's okay not to do this 100% of the time. You still have a senior year. You are still a high school senior. You should enjoy that. So do take some time to enjoy your senior year. Pre-college programs are great, but they are not necessary. You don't have to do a pre-college program. I had a student come up and ask me if it made a difference in the admissions process. It may at some institutions, but honestly, if you do an Indiana pre-college program, I'm not even going to know it whenever you apply. So be kind to yourself. Take a moment. This is not 100% of your focus. You're a high school student, so take some time to enjoy that because you're about to enter into a very different environment. So enjoy your time.
And I'll say start early. Take all the opportunities you can get to meet admission counselors, visit schools, just see what's out there. I had no idea how many schools were out there when I was in your guys' shoes. And of course, I loved the college I went to. I loved my experience, but who knows if I would have gone somewhere else if I had looked elsewhere. And start seeing if you want to go big or small, how far away from home you want to be or how close you want to be. All the factors that are going to be important for you. The earlier you start, the easier that process is going to be. Don't wait till you're starting your senior year to start thinking about that. I mentioned earlier, some people apply to 20 schools. if you want to, go for it. But if you can apply to less than 10, you can apply to 5. That is going to make your life a lot easier your senior year. So get an idea earlier of what you're looking for.
And I would say all of that very much ties together to Owen's point. The earlier you start thinking about things, the more time you can spread it out over. And keep it at bay so that it doesn't take over your entire life for all of that time. The more this fits into your natural life, the less stressful the entire process is. And I would say the more content you're going to feel with your outcomes, because you're going to feel great about the schools that are on your list. Sure, you might have some that you love more than others, and that's okay. You know, that's totally natural, but it's going to get you to a place where at the end of the process, you know that you can truly have a great experience at any of the schools that you wind up that are on your list. And that would be a truly successful place to be, I would say, at this time of your senior year when you all get there. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up. I want to say thank you so much to my admission friends for joining us tonight. Your experience and the information you have to share is definitely invaluable. To our guests, I'll be sharing the recording of this. In that, I will go ahead and include just kind of the names of the institutions and maybe a little bit of info about each one, because I know there were some questions that kind of came up about those things. I'll try to tie that together into that follow-up email that I send to our families. So with no further delay, thanks so much, folks, and everybody have a wonderful night. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Have a good evening.